escape from this prison. That is a dream. There are no walls and no fences. Only a few guards and hounds. But this is a natural prison. The cold weather all year round is the biggest stumbling block on their way out of prison. And the conditions here are also very difficult. Not enough to eat, not enough to wear. Long-term malnutrition has caused many people to develop night blindness. Jack had just been sent in. Unhappy with the situation, he planned to escape. He discussed his escape route with his cellmates. Just keep going south, crossing Lake Baikal to the Mongolian border. Then he'll be free. And now is not the time to break out of prison. They need to stock up on food for the road and wait for weather that would allow them to escape. 6 months had passed. They finally waited for a snowstorm. It was the perfect time to escape. But while Jack and the others were discussing their plan, the prison boss Smith found them and threatened Jack with a knife to take him away with him. And so, Jack escaped with a few close friends, and Smith, the bad weather, gave them the best help. They managed to escape from the police dogs, but the wind and snow were too strong. They couldn't see the road ahead. So Jack cut off the bark of a tree to make a mask. They continued on for about 30 miles. They found a shelter, distribute the food, making a fire to keep warm. But the prisoner with night blindness was collecting firewood, lost his way. By the time the inmates found him, he was already frozen. Too late to grieve, hastily buried his cellmate. He went on his way again. 3 months had passed. Food has long been eaten up. Now we can only catch some bugs and small fish to feed the hungry. But this is of no use to a few lords. In the night, they heard a strange sound. They went out to see. It was a pack of wolves eating a deer. Even the wolves were afraid of the hungry men. The wolves were so scared that they ran away. Then they started to grab the food from the wolves. Too late to cook it. Directly eaten raw. Jack felt that this was not the way to go on. So he planned to explore the road himself first. After a long and arduous journey, he finally saw the Baikal lake he had always dreamed of. So go back to call friends in prison. Together on the road to survival. And that's when they suddenly found someone behind them was following them. These men just escaped from prison. They were heading south. It was hard to find Lake Baikal, but then they realized someone was following behind them, and it was a woman. Learned after inquiries, the woman's name is Susan, also escaped from the prison. A woman in the middle of nowhere. Not only did she have no food or water, but also very dangerous, so she wanted to join them. But this group of old men, when faced with the choice between food and women, but chose the former, so they left her and moved on. Fortunately, they found a trapped deer at the lake. Now they could finally have a good meal. That's when one of the inmates noticed that Susan was still following them, so they brought her over. The next day, they showered and washed their clothes by the lake, tidying up their raggedy selves. At the same time, they also found that after freshening up, Susan was still a beauty. This time they took her on the road. No one was against it. Finally they arrived at the Mongolian border. In order not to be discovered by the villagers, they had to hide in the grass. Didn't dare to show themselves, but there were too many mosquitoes here. Several people were bitten many times. They have survived a lot of storms. Finally fell into the hands of mosquitoes. There is no other way. They ventured to the villagers to see what they could do to repel mosquitoes. The villagers gave him a mosquito repellent collar to wear around his neck. Now they are no longer afraid of mosquitoes. With Susan joining them, the road was not lonely anymore. She was very friendly to everyone. She also cleaned up the wounds of the wounded inmates. Everyone became more and more interested in her. They finally reached the Mongolian border, but when they got here, Smith didn't want to leave his home. He chose to stay behind. The remaining 6 people continued to travel to the border. They had to cross this desert and continue south across China, eventually escaping from Tibet to India. To protect themselves from the sun, they got sun hats and awnings, judging direction by shadows. In the desert, they walked from day to night, and from night to day, but the heat of the desert made them drink all the water they had. No food in the desert can be tolerated, but not without water at all. Just then, they spotted an oasis in the distance. Jack said it was a mirage, but they didn't care about that. They ran straight into the distance. In the desert, a few people struggling to move forward. No food and no water on their bodies. Soon several people could not support. Then they suddenly found an oasis in the distance. They forgot about their fatigue, running wildly towards the distance. Finally found the water source. They gathered around the well, drank hard regardless. They were able to recover their strength. Next they rested in place by the well to adjust their bodies. The next day, they filled all the equipment with water, continued their journey, but soon they encountered a sandstorm. Not only did they lose their water, but also made their already weak bodies, adding insult to injury. Everyone was seriously exhausted. Susan, also due to long hours of walking, feet have serious edema, cannot continue to walk, eventually did not last. After burying Susan, they continued their journey. Not enough water to drink, had to drip water onto the cloth, sucking with their mouths to quench their thirst. It wasn't long before another person did not make it through. Stayed here forever. They had now gone from 8 to 4. There was no way out. Even though they were sad, they still had to keep going. But just as they were taking a break, a fellow prisoner was awakened. At a glance, there was a snake crawling crawling on his body. He was so scared that he didn't dare to move. Good thing the snake crawled away, and he also crawled with it. Soon he brought back good news. He found the water source, and this water source was a mud pit. They didn't care about that much. A few people got down on the ground, drinking desperately the little muddy water. After that, they caught snakes to feed their hunger. Finally, they got half a life back. They continued to move forward, out of the desert. They came to the foot of the Great Wall. Soon they reached Tibet. They were taken in by the local people, gave them food and shelter. When the villagers learned that they were going to India, advised them that they had better wait for 2 or 3 months. Now it's very easy to encounter heavy snow, which is dangerous, but they didn't want to give up because they knew as soon as they stopped, it would be very difficult to go again. So they kept going. Finally, they made it to India and were welcomed by the locals. Here they went through a series of coups. Finally, after 50 years, Jack returned to the home he had longed for. The key to the house was still under the windowsill. He opens the door. It's as if he's back 50 years ago. There was a wife waiting for him. The couple looked at each other's aging faces. Their hearts were filled with longing and sadness. The good thing is that they were finally reunited.